can start.
Okay. Super. Yeah, I see 9 individuals have joined us. It's great to have you this afternoon, evening, morning. Thanks for joining us and taking the time. My name is Stephen Whitmore. I lead business development across the Sky Energy Group, and really great to have Brian Sylvester join us today from Boston Consulting Group. BCG is a proud member of the Board Now coalition. So a platform where individual entities, companies, and NGOs are taking and making a stand in terms of purchasing SAF right now and supporting the industry going forward. So BCG is a strong leader in this space, hanging out with other leaders. So Brian, super to have you on with us today. Senior Manager in Sustainability across the group within BCG. We're going to be chatting. Brian, I've got a good couple of questions already for you. So yeah, I'm glad you got your headset on. But we're really looking to explore some of your sustainability strategies, what's informed that, and particularly driving and reducing your business travel emissions space. I mentioned, leading in the coalition in Board Now, but you're working in other spaces and really championing the Science-Based Targets Initiative. You've lent in heavily there as well in terms of grading the aviation sector, sustainability guidance as well. So maybe we can also reflect on some of that. I'm sure some of the listeners would be interested in hearing some of that. And then to our listeners, please, there is an opportunity there to, the drill. There's an opportunity to ask questions and drop comments as well as and while Brian and I are engaging. But Brian, before I give you the mic, and before I open with questions, you do have a sort of a great video that I think is relevant just to give an overview of what BCG's been up to. So Avi, if I can ask you to maybe share that. And
yes, if you give me 1 second. Can everyone see my screen? Yes.
Yeah, all good. Thanks.
1 year ago, in a truly exciting moment in BCG's history, we announced a bold new commitment to achieve net
Oh, sorry. Seems like there's a
zero climate impact by 2030.
Sorry, guys. Looks like my internet
and become climate positive beyond then, removing more carbon.
We're getting it in stages, so
in the interest,
bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, exactly. We get it in intervals. I think. Let me see.
Atmosphere than we emit each year. We're thrilled to share with you our progress as we mark this 1-year anniversary. First, we've increased the ambition of our greenhouse gas emissions targets, committing to cut our emissions intensity in half by 2025. As part of this commitment, we've increased our goal to reduce business travel emissions from a 30% reduction per employee to a 48.5% reduction per employee by 2025.
Oh, we got a big part there, but looks like it's still loading.
We expect to achieve the majority of this reduction through changes to our travel norms in all geographies worldwide. We'll make explicit and thoughtful decisions about how we travel. This will ensure that we continue to deliver exceptional value for our clients and rewarding careers for our people, while minimizing our impact on the planet. We will meet the remainder of our target by supporting the use of sustainable aviation fuel for flights BCG has taken. And we will work with our airline clients to help increase their efficiency. We've already launched new partnerships with airlines and fuel producers to purchase sustainable aviation fuel. And we will continue to support our aviation sector clients to help advance the path to low carbon air travel. Our targets have been validated by the Science-Based Targets initiative, which is aligned with the global goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. These targets are amongst the most ambitious in our industry. To neutralize the emissions we are unable to avoid, we are integrating more CO2 removal solutions into our carbon offsets portfolio. This includes new partnerships to advance pioneering approaches such as soil carbon capture, as well as more mature nature-based solutions, for example, by supporting reforesting 1 million acres in the US. Lastly, we have further increased the impact we can have with clients and in society through expanding BCG's Center for Climate and Sustainability and the launch of BCG Green Ventures. We also continue to support the UK government with the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26.
We're at a crucial moment for the future of our planet. We remain fully committed to using our core business to drive climate action, leading by example through our net zero strategy, while we unlock the potential of those who can help combat the climate crisis.
We are proud of our progress so far and are deeply committed to the journey ahead, helping to build a better future together.
Thank you, Avi. Brian, impressive.
We got there in the end. Yeah,
we got it to the end. Absolutely. Technology sometimes let us down, and then other times with a prayer we get through that. But right, what that really reflects for me is your current reality and your future ambitions. But we've also got to take account that to get there, it's taken a good few years and some really hard work. So yes, want to reflect on some of your future ambitions, but also just talk about and engage about what got you there as well, so we can share those lessons. But before we go there, Brian, a bit of introduction for yourself and maybe a quick overview of BCG as an organized company.
Yeah, sure. So happy to, and thanks for having me here, Stephen and team. So my name is Brian Sylvester. So I am a senior manager in BCG's global internal sustainability team. So, and our team is responsible for the firm's our company's own commitments and performance. So, for example, the net zero goals that we've just heard about from Rich and Christoph. And so, for those who don't know, Boston Consulting Group is a global consulting firm. We partner with leaders in business and society to tackle their most important challenges and work to capture the greatest opportunities. And an important part of this is collaboration with the clients and partners to build sustainable advantage and to drive positive societal impact. And I think maybe before moving off of the intros, I would just say it's important for us, I think, to highlight why we've made this commitment or these commitments, the net zero ones we've just talked about. I think we're clearly committed to being a leader within the sustainability space. We heard of some of the examples in that video of the things that we have been doing. And like in many other sectors, industries, we are seeing, increased mounting expectations from a lot of different directions. So not only are our current employees, for example, expecting us to be a leader in the space, but prospective employees are looking to us for leadership as well. Also, increasingly our clients are looking for us in terms of the role that we're able to play, and expecting that we retain our leadership role in having, and part of that is being able to make this bold climate commitment around net zero, and also clearly to help shape and provide climate solutions. So in a nutshell, that's BCG, and our role in that is really focused on the internal side and on the commitments that we make there.
Yeah, fantastic. When you're saying, leading in that space, you can't actually, if you want to show direction and give direction, you've pretty much got to go
exactly.
there first, right? Eh?
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, an important part of is being able to walk the talk, so to speak, and it's admittedly, our business isn't as energy intensive or as reliant upon high emitting practices as some heavy industry, for example. But in professional services, there are unique challenges here, like in any sector. And a key part of that is being able to be part of, is being able to be with clients, being able to collaborate, being able to engage, and to finding ways to do that now with our commitment that are thoughtful about how we manage the practices that do generate emissions. And for us, because of being professional services, the largest source of our emissions tends to be from business travel, so that category of scope 3 emissions. And I'm sure we get into that a bit more. But yeah.
Absolutely. So when you're focusing on your decarbonizing strategy, where you've just acknowledged most of that carbon footprint being scope 3 in travel, but you've also embedded it in a setting science-based targets. Why was that so important, using the science-based targets and sort of framing your company's decarbonization strategy?
Yeah, I think so. We have this net zero goal. Maybe it's worth me just recapping what that's about. We heard, I think, in bits and pieces there in the video. I think there are two aspects to it. One is for us to halve our emissions intensity by 2025. This is the aspect that has been science-based targets validated. And for everything that we don't reduce, we will remove. So by 2030, we will be reliant upon carbon removal solutions, a blend of nature-based and engineered solutions to remove from the atmosphere the equivalent volume of CO2 that we emit each year. Now, just on the first part of that, really, we like many others who are committed to taking action and on this decarbonization journey, recognize the importance of first abating, right? So that's the first step on this pathway. And
by abating, you mean reducing?
Exactly, reducing the emissions that we generate. And when it comes to that, and it comes to the standards to be able to assess that, the strength of that ambition, for some time, science-based targets, I'd say, has been at the forefront, and they continue to be very present and active, clearly. And so that seal of recognition, and to be able to have our targets validated as being in line with what's required for the global goals, so the Paris Agreement goals, I think it's very important for a credibility point of view of what we're trying to achieve. And I think beyond that, really, what's most important is that we have confidence in the targets that we've set, right? And I think that sort of goes hand in hand, ultimately.
Yeah. And your targets also, by setting science-based targets, that would be time related, right? You've spoken about 2030 in achieving these, not waiting and giving yourself a budget that would expire in 2050, but it's
important. It's a very interesting and timely question. So there's two things to separate. So I think up until now, until this week, science-based targets have had been able to validate the reduction goals that companies set. Later this week, they will publish for the first time guidance on net zero goals. So those are two separate things, right? So it hasn't been possible prior to now to be able to have a science-based target validated net zero goal. But what we do have, and what's important here, I think, is, if our conversation is the abatement goals that we have set are aligned with those requirements. So and that, as you said, alluded to a little bit earlier. I'm very interested to be able to share a bit about that. That's not a straightforward journey, and I wouldn't expect it should be for any of the participants or listeners here. But I think it's an important journey to make a start on, and to be persistent and consistent in pursuit of. Yeah.
So the logic of you being a services-based industry and having a lot of your carbon scope 3 emissions from aviation, that was the basis for you also deciding to look to solutions and investing in the space, or?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. For as I said, business travel, and within business travel, air travel, it typically makes up, and I say typically because during the pandemic. It's been atypical, but typically it would make up around about 80% of our GHG footprint. And to have any meaningful objectives here, we need to be able to address that category of emissions. And really, when you look closely, and to keep it simple, there are really two levers that are available, right? One is to travel differently, and that can involve, travel, how far you travel, how much you travel, those kinds of considerations, how frequently you travel, modes of travel, absolutely. But all in all, that's really a bucket about how you travel, right? And then what's left really from an aviation point of view, or business travel and flights point of view, is then sustainable aviation fuels, right? And so that hasn't always been something obviously available to corporate or to companies who have large scope 3 travel footprints. But I think the guidance you referred to a minute ago around science-based targets does provide some helpful clarity and direction there. And aligned with that, I think ourselves and some of the other companies you alluded to, we're part of a number of groups similarly minded trying to take action in this space. We have started to send the right signals, we hope, to the market to signal that this is our intent to be able to leverage this. And I think that's important because there's a question around supply and demand, right? So the demand signals have not always been there. So it's not always been, well, let me put it this way. There's growing confidence that the supply will start to rise, to adapt the growing demand, at least from a corporate perspective. The whole policy agenda is probably for a different conversation. Yeah.
Okay. And the particular importance of setting science-based targets, you speak of these two buckets. So science-based targets doesn't allow for a third bucket, right? Which is the offsetting. It's asking for in-sector solutions.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, very good point. Thanks for flagging that. Yeah, I agree. And so for us, and as I try to kind of, I can't overstate the importance, I think, of the first step, acknowledging that we need to get on this reduction journey. Right. Absolutely. And then subsequently look at removing what's left, once we're able to do as much as we can. I think just generally speaking, that's the kind of sequencing that I think science-based targets and we recognize as being important as well.
Correct. And so when you look purchasing SAF or investing in the SAF space, you're transitioning that SAF into the equivalent amount of carbon emissions that can be saved through the life cycle of that production of that SAF. So okay, and that's for you the importance of the investment process, because you're doing in-sector reductions instead of looking for alternatives and solutions external to that sector. So what's amazing about you is in looking for that, you realize that you've got to support that sector. What does that mean for BCG in terms of getting involved in the aviation sector as business? And what would you say to other businesses to be looking to do something similar and not waiting for the kind of holy grail?
Yeah, I think maybe I can tell it in this way. I think so as we've established, right? So we rely heavily on the aviation sector. I think it's also worth highlighting that, as we started this journey, we looked across the sector to understand the path for aviation to reach net zero over the long term. We wanted to ensure that each action we pursued was able to support our macro view of how the industry as a whole can transition. And so we, from this macro view, we think there are like a number of interventions that are needed, right? So keeping it simple, again, I think designing and flying planes more efficiently, using SAF. Then there's also the question around new or emerging technologies, right? Whether and what like new propulsion technologies or types of fuel might be available and when those can be unlocked and kind of like at commercial scale. And we think over the long term, all of these are required.
Right.
No
silver bullet. Yeah.
Exactly, right. And so I think when we think about our own actions, right, we're also thinking about what impact those innovations I talked about might have on our ability to achieve our goals, but also what role we can play to help scale those most promising initiatives, right? And now I'll try not to, speak out of turn on behalf of the rest of my colleagues, but from the perspective of our net zero commitment, we think that the role we can play is really in, trying to be a leader in this space and trying to show to others that, hey, look, there's lots of uncertainty available. I mean, there's lots of uncertainty that persists. There's no kind of ready-made playbook to follow, but I think the collaboration and the partnership with, across the value chain, not just between corporates like ourselves or corporate business travelers like ourselves, but also with folks like yourselves who are producers or any other player in the value chain with a role to play here. I think just being able to collaborate and demonstrate that there's this willingness and there's this intent, right? And I think that sends a positive signal. And we can see, right? I think the reception that you all have had and continue to have, I think, is illustrative of that, right? Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. So it's one good thing to look inside, do your assessments, but the solutions lie in collaboration and taking a broader picture and a broader view of all stakeholders and role players.
Yeah, and I think you asked,
as much as you can.
Exactly, and I think you asked, which I probably didn't get around to answering directly, but what should others do? I think I was saying this point about the uncertainty to basically say, uncertainty will persist, but it's possible to find a way through, right? If you pursue it in collaboration and in the spirit of openness and willingness to learn. I think those are key aspects to it. Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. I'm looking to the side of if there's any specific questions coming from the group. Maybe I don't see anything specific, and maybe I'd like to say is we also hi, Avi.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so to all of our listeners, it's really great that you're here. Thank you for joining us. But if you have any questions, and I think you can either share your audio and video as well and ask it live, or you can ask it in the chat. So please feel free to shoot away any questions you may have for Brian or Stephen.
Thanks, Avi. And maybe, Avi, I can also suggest if we just put a link to both the board and our program, but also maybe the science-based targets for the aviation industry and sector. Brian, that's actually a bit of a misnomer, right? Because it speaks about, it says aviation sector targets, but as we've been speaking, there's an inclusion there of how corporates can use those.
Exactly. Yeah. They're, that's correct. So we've seen when you take a look at it, you'll see there is an aspect there that's relevant to airlines, for example, but it also helps to provide this clarification that I alluded to around how, for example, SAF can be a part of corporates or companies whose scope 3 business travel includes flights. Yeah, can you make use of SAF? Absolutely. Yeah.
And because Boston Consulting doesn't do cargo, maybe let me just add cargo to that as well. And because you don't have private jets as a company, we can add private jets to that as well. So yeah, SAF as a solution within the science-based targets is accepted for scope 3 and scope 1 emissions related to corporate travel on those corporate freight, your staff travel, business travel, and if you have any private jet arrangements. Those are all ways to use SAF. And as you've pointed out, the only sort of in-bucket solution, the other solution is first and foremost reduction.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see. We have a question. What is the process behind SAF? I've never heard of sustainable aviation fuel. Now, I could rattle on this, but I think it's always good to get it from someone.
I'm happy to defer to you, Stephen. Why would I stand in the way of the experts? So yeah, no, please feel free. Yeah.
Julie, thanks so much for the question. SAF standing for Sustainable Aviation Fuel, a fuel that is produced from both biogenic feedstocks, and particularly from waste. So we can use used cooking oil, we can use alcohol to jet, we can use municipal solid waste, agricultural residues, various technologies out there. The types of feedstocks and technologies are governed by ASTM, which is the industry norm structures that will determine the properties of the fuel. So they have to be exactly the same as what fleets fly on today, fossil. So there's no difference in the end molecule. The difference lies in the recycling of carbon effectively and ensuring that no new carbon is entered through the system through fossil. So it's an abatement and a stimulant for a circular economy using waste streams and transitioning those into aviation Jet A molecules. The benefit of that, in addition, is there are a range of side or byproducts, products like naphtha and green LPG that also land up in producing more sustainable forms of hard plastics and polymers that you could use in your laptops and your iPhones and so forth. So it's a real stimulant for a circular-based economy and the prevention of new carbon being extracted and entering the system. Brian, did I do a good enough job and I didn't get too technical on everybody?
We should ask Julie this question.
Yes, true.
No, I think
does that help? And if we can help out with any more information, please reach out to us. Be more than happy to just share in this space. Today, unfortunately, there's around about 115,000 tons of SAF. That's equivalent enough to fly kind of the aircrafts around about maybe 2 days of all the flights in the world. We need a whole lot more production, and this is the sort of the chicken and egg space where corporates are jumping in and saying we also require that to meet our carbon emission reductions and our targets based on science-based targets to be net zero, and are helping drive the uptake of SAF in the space. Super. Julie is happy with the answer. Brian, thank you for the time, and thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it. Further details, we can put Brian's. Brian, can we put your contact details on that for any?
Yeah, I think if you click on my profile here, you can get to my LinkedIn. If not, please feel free to share that Avi with the group if they're interested. Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you all for joining us. Much appreciated. And Avi for, again, hosting us.
Thanks all. Thanks, Stephen.
Cheers, Brian. Bye all.